Welcome back, Dragon Ballers, to Get the Mic, the only show where your hosts on the left, Owl,
And your host on the right, Brock.
dissect fiction for its mythological significance. And on this episode, we're talking about Beware of Robot, specifically the pirate robot at the bottom of the cave that Goku, Bluma, and Krillin are looking for the Dragon Ball in. I think before we continue, I do want to say there may be some delay in uploads as far as like Christmas break goes, things like that. But hopefully after that we'll be on a more solid upload schedule. I know we've been pretty solid recently, so I'm just kind of forewarning everyone about that.
Yeah, there's a chance that we're not going to be able to front load a lot of these recordings throughout the Christmas break. So there may be a bit of a break for us. I know that most creators are going to have breaks in that time, though it would be nice to be able to consistently be able to put some stuff out for you guys.
Yeah, we might have to go down to like 2 uploads a week, but if we do, we'll let you know.
We're not planning on going dark.
No, definitely not. We're going to try and bring some content out to our loyal fans going forward. Anyways, I think other than that there's no housekeeping stuff. So, let's go ahead and start talking about this episode. Unless you want to address the elephant in the room, the Toei debacle.
I guess it'd be fun to talk about it while it's relevant. Though by the time this comes out, it will have already probably been resolved. But I would like to talk about it while it's fresh on our minds.
Just give a couple sentences or couple sentences.
Summary: Toei has attacked Totally Not Mark essentially on his catalog and retroactively brought down his videos and subsequently essentially his catalog of videos. And I think that it speaks to the commentator community, especially whenever it comes to Dragon Ball, considering we all need to use the imagery and the music or representations of their music in our work so that we can reach an audience. I don't think that it bodes well necessarily for the commentary community. I don't agree with the idea that Toei should be able to, I guess, essentially lean on the YouTube algorithm and say that's fine and take down retroactively the art that people have put their effort into, especially when it's as transformative as Marx is. Now, I'm not saying that Marx is necessarily the level of transformative that ours is, but
Or even other like Geekdom 101, things like
yeah.
that, right? That really kind of go in depth into certain aspects of it.
But this coming on the heels of the removal of the dislike button, it just really gets my hackles up whenever it comes to this sort of thing
Oh, definitely
because
for YouTube, yeah.
I think that creators should have the freedom, as long as they're within the realm of transformative work as far as fair use is concerned. They should be able to express their vision, you know.
Uh, that's good. Yeah. I would say, while I think I definitely disagree with Toei's abuse of the algorithm, the system, um, I do want to mention that it is hard to say, um, the level of content used, right? There's a gradient there
Hmm.
for how much Toei is looking at content, right? And the best we can do as creators right now, which sucks, and I think it shouldn't be this way, is kind of cover our own asses, and that's why we have that black band that goes across our clips.
Right, and that's why we don't use the original music either, because we really don't know. And whenever it comes to Japanese law, it's not exactly clear
Right.
as to where they draw the line. I think it's a little bit vague.
It says minor, right?
Right.
Minor use of the content.
I don't like the idea that it's not explicit. I don't like the idea that it's up to interpretation where it crosses the line between minor and major usage of a copyrighted material. Um, I don't think that people should be able to re-upload, and there are channels that have not been taken down that just use clips wholesale and just they have millions and millions of views saying like Vegeta's best line. Like I'm not honestly, I would rather them be taken down than somebody like Mark who puts effort into his videos, and even though maybe he doesn't honor the spirit of being as transformative as he could be, he is transformative in the spirit of what he creates.
Right, and this is to say that I think we're in agreement that we think Toei is in the wrong here, and we're trying to join in the community in the solidarity of saying that Toei's in the wrong. I think what sparked that was kind of part of the issue I hold with it, but I agree with the fandom. I think that Toei's unilateral decisions are, I don't even know if they hurt the franchise because the franchise is so ironclad at this point. But it's
I
definitely
don't know
not
if
good for
Toei is
the image.
even able to harm the power of what the original two series, being Dragon
Right,
Ball and
that's what I
Dragon Ball Z,
mean.
created, right?
That's what I mean. I don't know if they have even enough influence. But what I mean is it's not a good look for them. I think it's a bad decision to make, and I think they should reverse it if
I
possible.
think it's draconian, and I don't think that it helps the franchise. I don't think it helps the brand. And so, yeah, I think it's good to just put a statement out that this is not good for Dragon Ball as a whole.
And not even just Dragon Ball because other other videos were flagged that weren't even Dragon Ball, let's say.
Yeah, I mean, if Mark loses his backlog, it's not just Dragon Ball. He's covered other things like One Piece and Berserk, and I know that we're both huge fans of Berserk. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't want Toei to be able to put a stranglehold on the commentary around
Well,
Berserk either.
especially because Berserk is unlike Dragon Ball in the sense that it is an amazing story that people don't know about because everyone knows about Dragon Ball. Goku had a float in the Macy's Day Parade. Like,
Right. And Mark bringing people's attention to Berserk, even if he doesn't necessarily
see, that's what I mean. I
understand
think
the
Mark,
deeper mythological aspects of it, I
sure,
want him to be there to show
and
the
I
amount of
think
viewers he has that this is a good thing that they should engage with.
right, and I think he does a better service to Berserk than, let's say, to Dragon Ball.
Yeah, I would agree, So this is wholeheartedly it's a draconian sort of agreement between Toei and YouTube as to where they're going to draw the line. And
And use the system to just screw creators over, and that's what we're against.
yeah, I mean, we've spoken out that the removal of the dislike button is bad, even if it, I guess, on an optical scale, helps us. I think that we deserve truth as creators and as viewers. We deserve transparency and truth as far as what we want to interact with and what we think about it. And this is not. This ain't it, Chief. This ain't it.
This ain't it. I think that's a good spot to leave off. All right. Well, we spent 8 minutes talking about that, introducing things. I think we should get into the episode at
Yeah.
this point. All right. So, the first thing, actually, let me pull up my notes real quick. But on the last episode, we saw our heroes. They went through the pirates' traps, and specifically, they went through an arrow trap. They used the power pole to get across it. Blue sent his soldiers further on, and they all basically died.
They died, but they didn't die.
They died, but it's a cartoon. I wonder. I wonder how the uh, manga's different.
I think that the hallway trap is, of course, a precursor to the main trap of the last episode, where both parties faced a form of enlightenment and overcame it in different ways. We see the interplay start up a little bit between Blue and Bulma here, where Blue's confrontation with that enlightenment is the opposite of Bulma's confrontation with that enlightenment, where she fails in its sight, but Blue's sight is greater than that, and that's why he's able to overcome his enlightenment test, you could say, and she's not.
Right. She has to be. She has to use the ancestral spirit as a crutch to be able to get across.
Which is what she's been doing this whole arc with shrinking herself down and using Goku to be able to ride the Nimbus and all of those different things. It's as we get closer and closer to this confrontation between them, we're going to see that difference in spirit. We're going to see that Bulma needs to be able to integrate that wisdom, and just essentially leaning on the spirit of Goku and leaning on the fact that the heroic spirit hypothetically overcomes these things is not enough, and it has to be embodied.
And I think it's to say that it's no accident that Bulma is part of this adventure
I would say she's at the center of it.
more than Goku.
We'll see.
We'll see. Okay. So yeah, we see the soldiers here. We see all that. Now, the skull. Did you talk about the skull trap here? I had to go get the door.
Um, a little bit. I don't know if we need to rehash it too much, but just the idea that the lights coming out of the skulls and the enlightenment that has to do with the vision of the fact of death. And I don't want to get too specific because that is what the robot's design is
Right.
articulating, right? That fact of death. And I think maybe that's a good way to segue here because the only other thing that happens in the episode is that they converge here where the sub is. They see, or Goku senses originally, the robot, quote unquote. Bulma has the intuition that it might be a ghost. Then they say, no, it's not a ghost, it's a robot. But I think the ghost intuition
The
is right.
ghost aspect is the spirit of it, right?
Hmm.
Because robots are spiritless creatures. This is not a spiritless creature.
That's the glowing eyes that we see
Because think
light up,
about
right?
think about the robot that Goku used to travel to Muscle Tower. That was a robot.
Right.
Metallatron, Android 8, this pirate robot, none of those are soulless beings.
Well, they're animated by something.
Yes. They're more like golems than robots.
Well, I think golem is actually a really good way of putting it because a golem, you can think of it in the alchemical sense. It's that spirit inside of matter, right? The
Yes.
matter doesn't matter, and you don't want to get hung up on the matter. It's not pointless that a robot has um, an eidos, I don't even know if eidos is the right word to put it, but it has a motivating underlying element to it that it has a purpose, right?
Yes.
And that purpose is what we're dealing with here, and that purpose or spirit is what Goku's always interacting with, and not just the physical manifestation.
And I want to say that is kind of what separates to the fictional representation of robots from something like this to something like Rick and Morty, where the whole idea of placing a spirit within a robot is ridiculed and seen as farcical.
That's that postmodern intuition of what a robot represents, right? That it is without spirit, and that it is separate from the creator.
And I think that's further away from that golem idea
Hmm.
than we've gotten because technology has advanced in that
Well,
way.
you think about a tool, right? A tool as an extension of the user, and that the purpose of the tool is always determined by the intent of the user who's using it. But the more postmodern interpretation of that idea is that, well, actually, the platonic form of the tool is just a tool. It's like, no, it's really not.
It's more than
Like
that,
what?
exactly.
Like what's a chair, right?
Right. Or even I think even better than that is like if you're saying what's a hammer,
Hmm.
and you can use a symbol of a hammer and people will assume you mean construction, creation, right? It has symbology with it just by the nature of it being part of the human collective unconsciousness.
Exactly, and that's why I mentioned a chair too, because like a stump can be a chair. We
Right.
define a chair by its function, what its
Well, that's kind
purpose
of the
is.
opposite end
You
of what
know,
I was saying. The
sure.
symbology there and then the symbology broken down by use, the tool, right?
Right, and that sort of, we get tangled up in language in that sense because you can say that this is just the material aspect of what a robot is it's just a collection of things that it doesn't have a mind of its own, and because it doesn't have a logic or a logos of its own, that it doesn't have a symbolic meaning or it doesn't have a purpose beyond the fact that it's just a robot. In the same sense that you can be like, oh well, something that looks like a chair but isn't used for sitting on is still a chair. It's like, well, the way that we define a chair is that it's something that you use to sit on. So there's the spirit of the thing, there's the purpose of it, there's the idea of it or the platonic form of it, and then there is, of course, the physical manifestation of it. And so that's what we're going to be talking about with this quote unquote robot, because I don't think that this is just a security system. right? Because that's what we're seeing in this episode as they approach it, as they
Well,
say,
what do
"Oh,
you
well,
mean
this is."
just a security system? Because I think it is a security system that is further aligned with the execution of the story to cross over and indicate that that spirit is involved with the robot.
Right, but saying that it's just a security system is to say it's
Oh,
just a
just,
gun,
just. Okay, I see what you're
right?
saying. Well, sorry, I was thinking you meant that it.
It is a security system.
Okay,
It's
sorry.
not just a security system.
The just part. Go
Mhm.
ahead. Go ahead.
Well, the it has a purpose, you know? It is motivated by a greater spirit than itself, and I l this might be one of my favorite parts, and I'm starting to understand what you were saying earlier about how it really digs into that symbology and starts to find its purpose here in the Red Ribbon Saga, because I love the way that this scales, especially with the literal symbology that they put into it. Because the iterative nature, it's sort of like, thus far you can see, oh well, light sort of represents enlightenment, and lightning is sort of enlightening, but this is the nail in the coffin with this little arc, because it's saying that no, I meant to say that light is enlightenment. I meant to say that water is unconscious and all of those different things. It's very concrete here.
It's like, yeah, now it's almost the now I'm gonna prove it to you by bringing it all together,
Hmm.
right? And that happens in these last couple of. That's why I was so excited to get to
Yeah,
Blue.
it's very exciting.
Um, and I'm even more excited to get to what comes after Blue,
Hmm.
like immediately after Blue. I mean, not Arale, but
No,
after
but
that.
yeah.
Anyway, so yeah, and so we see the robot here. So let's go ahead and describe the robot, Brock.
So the first thing about the robot that we'll see is that it has a skull for a head. What do you think what do you think Toriyama is trying to convey by putting a skull as this robot's head?
Well, it's also not a human skull.
Right. It's a
It's worthy
skull
of
as
mentioning.
such, sort of. It's a fanged skull that's elongated, similar to a xenomorph.
Right, and it's interesting that it's on a robot
Hmm.
because it's almost more of like an undead creature animated by the spirit of piracy itself, right? Because we do have to remember this is a pirate cave, right? Now, and they're after the pirate's treasure. Now, why can pirates amass treasure?
Because they're constantly confronting chaos and gathering the reward of being able to do that.
Well, maybe I don't know if it's confronting chaos. They're more embodying chaos, right?
They're an
They're
arbiter of
becoming
chaos,
they're
or you could.
becoming a dragon in the sense, and they're able to hoard that gold in a
That's a
similar
good way of
way
putting. It's an embodiment of the dragon, you
of the
could say. Yeah.
chaos, right?
Hmm.
Rape, pillage, plunder, right? That's the pirate way. And so here, right, we see that it's almost a regression to that bestial state, right? The xenomorphic skull, right? It's not human. It's an inhuman form or spirit to adopt.
Not only that,
Well, that's just the first thing. We were just on the
yeah.
skull.
Well, it has a skull and crossbones on its forehead as well.
Yes.
And the marking and how this works, you can think of the mark of the beast even in biblical symbology, where the when something is marked in that sense symbolically, we see that its purpose is becomes a part of its form, you know. And so the skull on the skull
Part of its
seems
spirit.
silly, but it's symbolically saying that this skull-headed robot is expressing the symbol of death. And the symbol of death is deeper. It's much more primordial. And so I guess I'll start getting some of my analysis out here now, but also the aspect of the skull emblazoned with a skull reminds me of Dr. Peterson writes about this as well, but Kali, right? The spirit of the terrible feminine archetype that is associated with death, and Kali wears skulls around her neck, right? And also, of course, is shown in different ways as fanged, has a serpent like characteristics, either has a skull around her neck or wears a skull around her waist, or is holding a snake, has snake vestments, as far as you can think of it as adornments like clothing, uses the snake as an adornment in this robot. does so as well, and that's why we see the snake-like body underneath the skull
And the tail.
and the tail as well. It's it's the snake and the skull, which represents the terror of Mother Nature, right?
Well, and that's what the pirates want to be, right? The terror of the high seas.
Yes.
And so what do they instantiate as their guard but a terror, right? And that's what this is.
And its destruction, it is just death. And its sole purpose is death. It does nothing but hone in. It uses its glowing red eyes, right, to discern where they are and continually just try to kill.
And it is though a spirit or a soul. No, neither of those. It is a vessel possessed, right? It is in that way that it's not let's say a thinking or logical being. It is possessed of that spirit like a golem that we were talking about earlier, right?
Right.
And so the test for Goku, the Go crew, is exactly that. They have to measure their fortitude up against the idea of true demise. Because up until this point, like really, Goku has faced it one other time, true danger, and that's when White almost killed him.
Right. Whenever he was knocked unconscious by being shot in the back of the head.
That's the only other time.
But let's break that out. That's to say that that instantiation of malice was possibly able to kill the heroic spirit in that moment.
Only because of the him turning around, being
The
manipulated.
blindness, right? Facing
Here,
away.
here, he's not being manipulated, and it's a challenge to him because of the idea of death, suffering, terror, even coming together in this form.
Well, this is a crystallization of those ideas.
And how does one defeat those things, right? It's tough to say. And so, what our heroes decide to try and do, as we're getting into it, I think is a good segue. Is they are Goku tries to run it into a wall using its own momentum against it, right? And you can use not you, I want to say, people and spirits can run themselves out of steam or destroy themselves, right? If left to their own devices. And I think that's what's expressed here when Goku is leading this robot on to crash it into the wall. Meanwhile, Bulma and Krillin are trying to get a cannon ready to fire at the robot and attempt to destroy it. Also, directly after that, Goku uses the power pole to try and defeat the robot to no avail. So let's break those things down one at a
Right.
time.
So let's talk about the cannon first.
Cannon first or wall first?
Oh, I guess wall.
Just
Because
in order that they appear.
So
Well, before that too,
try to hit
actually,
it with a
there's even
truck.
more. There's even more. Because before that, the boys try to use their martial arts skills they learned from the Muten Roshi to fight him.
I guess it's even more complex than we're putting it out.
I know,
Yeah.
exactly. And so Bluma also tries to run the truck into him.
Okay. So
So
first
let's
and
break
foremost, the
that
martial
down.
arts,
The
right?
martial arts with the Muten.
So the martial arts representing that forthright contending with something, and your potential to be able to overcome it in that physical, forthright, like martial sense, I guess you could say, where um does Goku have do Goku and Krillin have the ability to beat this by being forthright and confronting it and I want to say confronting it, but just honestly contending with it, right?
See, I think I have a little bit of a different analysis
Okay.
because what I was thinking with it is that the boys from having served under the Muten Roshi, right? They've learned an appreciation for the hierarchy. That's what the whole World Tournament Saga was about, right? And so to put this in this presence and to say the boys are showing you how much they appreciate the hierarchy.
Hmm.
The pirate doesn't give a fuck about the hierarchy, right?
That's a good
That's
way of
why
putting
it
it. Yeah.
fails. That's why it fails, right? Would you agree?
Yeah, that's a better way of saying it because this is not something that just being present and being the best and being or you could say being the best at playing within the terms of the game, right?
Death doesn't play by the rules of the
Death
game.
comes for all, right?
Exactly. That's where this is going.
Hmm. So that doesn't work. obviously,
Right, and then,
because you can't beat death by just being strong.
and Bulma, of course, being Bulma, being resourceful, being a strong female figure, right? I don't wanna say she's super weak, even though we've shown her weakness and moral
Well, she's
character.
here.
She's growing, right? You gotta grow along with her, everyone. So, she decides to ram a truck into the robot and crash him off the
She's
edge,
using the pirates' technology to try to overcome
which
death.
is to say, right, that the feminine spirit can manipulate that societal boon and use it for her own means.
Which is not enough, obviously.
Not nearly. So
Now, the
that
way that she's able to do it, though, is that Goku is trying to run it into the wall. And when he tries to run it out on its own terms, right, he realizes that it follows him no matter what he does. And he says, well, then maybe I can outrun it. And then also that doesn't work. So he says, maybe I can trick it and I can make it hit the barrier, the barrier being the wall. Maybe I can run it to its limit. Um, but that
well, and
doesn't
that's to say
work.
too that the borders of the cave, right, are what is both life sustaining and separating the order from the chaos, right? Perhaps Goku thinks I can trick this thing into crashing so far
That it
into the
goes into
chaos
chaos and then it's
that
not part of the
it's
order. Yeah.
gone from this order and we don't have to worry about it. It's almost Goku manipulating.
The rules.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's really interesting to see, especially because it gives Bulma and Krillin the time to devise another kind of plan.
Which is the truck that Bulma decides to use because in Goku, or not the truck, but the cannon
The
that
cannon, right?
that
I was
they
about to say they already
sorry
used the truck.
sorry the cannon that Bulma and Krillin come together to try to use against it while he's doing this. And so I'm curious to hear what you have to say whenever it comes to the fact that the cannon is sort of like crossing the two approaches, because Krillin's martial arts isn't enough, and Bulma's manipulation of the technological aspects of society aren't enough. And then they try to focus the martial and the technological into a shot at it. Like
Well,
it's almost like
hmm.
the masculine and the feminine kind of combined in that sense to strike at it.
See, I wasn't really thinking of it like that, but it's interesting you bring it up because I was more thinking that the canon was in the same spirit of the pirates. They're trying to use its own spirit against it, right? Like, here are the rules of piracy, play against those. And of course, the pirate robot doesn't care because we've already established he doesn't care about hierarchies and rules. It's only about that death, terror, destruction.
Right. Well, I would say that's pretty true of the truck, right? Because the technology, what the technology represents, doesn't beat it in and of itself.
Well,
Because
because and the other thing is because a cannon is far more in the spirit of pirates than the truck. That's
it's
why
also
I
more in the masculine expression than you could say like a vehicle, which is like the truck, which is sort of like what
aren't.
carries
I
you to
would say
that
they're
place.
both masculine expressions, but I would say yeah, the cannon is more extreme.
Hmm.
But the cannon being part of the pirate spirit, I think, is where I was getting at. It's interesting that you're saying about Bulma and Krillin coming together to do that. I hadn't really thought about it like that.
But of course, it's not enough either, because this is something that is transpersonal. This is a spirit. This is the spirit of death in a sense.
Well, I
Um,
was more thinking that the reason the canon doesn't work in my analysis of it being part of the spirit of the pirate is that Bulma and Krillin's understanding and encompassment and their ability to embody the spirit of the pirate is so insignificant that it's not going to be able to stop the actual instantiation of the spirit of the pirate, which is the robot. What do you
True.
think
I
about
guess
that?
you could say that if they were fully integrated and could
If they were pirates,
well, if they had
that might
attained
work.
the enlightenment that this spirit represented, then they could confront it on its level, but they can't. And so and this is an extension of using the tools against the thing itself, right? So the cannon is a low resolution version of what this robot is, right?
Right.
And it needs to have a true pirate manning it for it to have the outcome. But this is the spirit embodied, and so you know
So
it.
it won't be stopped by this.
So yeah, it's basically it's like, could you punch it with its own fist? I guess if you were stronger than it was, but they're not.
Exactly, and so that fails as well,
So Goku then escalates it to the next level, and he decides to use the Noibo against
which
it.
is the last thing we'll see in this set of clips. Yeah, we're getting through this pretty well, actually.
There's just a lot to it.
And you would think, right? It's like, oh, it's just a bunch of fighting. It's like, no, not really. Not till later is it just a bunch of fighting.
At this point, every blow seems to matter.
Right. And so, I mean, of course there's like they use the same shots sometimes, but like the beats are there. And so he uses the Noibo against the robot, and for the first time in the series, what happens?
Just catches it.
He catches it, and it does 3 times. It's like bam, bam, bam.
It's a big moment too. It's like wham, and it's really impactful. I had forgotten that it happened that way, but it's a big deal.
It is because I mean, you have to put it in the context. The last time we saw the Noibo, what happened? Goku smacked a bunch of Red Ribbon soldiers aside. What has he been contending with? Red Ribbon this whole time, right? Now he there's a new spirit in town. Bam, it catches it. It's a pretty impactful
The
part.
the reason that it can catch it is complicated in my opinion, and it's tied into the whole purpose of this space that they're in, right? Because this is primordial. And Goku's use of the Noibo in this instance, I'm going to use it in a weird way. I'm going to refer to it as more along the lines of the Axis Mundi, which we're going to come to much later. But we're seeing it represented here because that center of being that the Axis Mundi represents, Goku is using being. It's almost like an expression of being, but death is a part of being. Death is a part of the true experience that is archetypal for everybody. And so Goku can't use that archetypal being against this because this knows of that. This is of that
Yeah,
ilk. This
and
is, you could say that this is uh, it's almost as if it were as old as the power pole is in its instantiation.
right, and to put it in terms we've been using, I would say is that the ancestral spirit cannot conquer terror and death.
They're a part of the ancestral
They're
spirit.
a part of it. Yeah, exactly. And so, yeah, tossed aside.
It's like, oh, I'm familiar with this because I am ancestral. I am a piece of
And
that
we haven't
experience.
seen any instantiation of a spirit like that before. That's why this robot, like, I know it seems so weird. Like,
Yeah.
here's a robot, fight the
Here's a
robot.
random
It
pirate
seems
robot.
like a
Yeah.
D&D campaign almost. Like, here's some random shit you have to do in order to get the treasure. It's like, no, it's really deep. And also, I do want to mention before we move on that Blue is watching
Of course,
most of this.
Blue spends a lot of time watching. And I think that's significant because Blue is enlightened. Blue has in he's able to internalize so many things so quickly that I think that's a part of his character. Um he's similar to what we've seen early on in the series where we're like, "Oh, Goku's eyes are open and he's able to see what's happening." Blue's not missing a beat here. He knows what's happening, you know? Whereas you could say
He's just perverted the way that he travels.
exactly. He's on a different way. But
Well, I
unlike you
think
could
perverted, and I don't mean to say that gay people are perverted, but in the time this was written, I think perverted is exactly what it should be, what the word it should be.
we're inevitably going to have that conversation because
In the next episode,
we have to
yeah.
take Toriyama's approach to this to understand what he's trying to get at. And so, it's going to happen,
It's gonna happen.
but that's the thing about about Blue being able to see what's happening here and to understand uh what level Goku's on because we see over and over that he respects what Goku's able to do and how strong Goku is. And the fact that he can see what's happening in this fight is why the people who are watching the world tournament can't see what's happening whenever it gets to those higher levels. He's able to actually understand what it means for Goku and Krillin and Bulma to be able to contend with this concept.
And I think too, I think to distinguish down the spirit that Blue represents is that disgust, that strength through disgust, and it's so well established by his first couple of scenes that here, and as we proceed forward, that power of disgust and power of distinction that Blue perfectly embodies is going to be what his strength, what he relies on to go
That is
forward.
his strength.
Yeah. And so let's go ahead and continue to the next part. I think it's Zoom. So then we see after the Noibo is used, right after the Noibo is used, the robot oh no, is it right after?
He's knocked into the water. We may have the order of events mixed up slightly.
No, no, that was from the cannon.
I think the cannon knocks it into the water, but it's not sufficient, right?
I think the cannon destroys that part. Anyways, Goku gets pulled down into the water. Let's look at what the notes say. That's why we wrote
I
these.
think it's the cannon.
So Goku gets pulled under the water by the robot's tail. He gets electrocuted, breaks tail, and jumps out of the water, but now he's tired.
Mm-hmm.
Rubble land. Oh, okay. So he jumps out first. After he's dragged down, he gets electrocuted, and then he swims up, jumps out, lands there, and that stuff falls. And
Well,
then
a lot
then he
happens
gets
there.
crushed.
But
Yeah.
what knocks the robot down into the water, I believe, is the cannon. I think that the final thing that ultimately like knocks it over, and so
They
they
think the
that they've
robot is
won,
destroyed.
yeah,
Yeah.
is which, I mean, I guess that would make
So
sense
where does
as
the
far as the.
Noibo have?
I think it's just right before that, but I think that it makes sense if you consider it that Bulma and Krillin come together to use that thing, and they think that that's sufficient, but it's not. And then the heroic spirit is then dragged down by its tail into the water after they believe that that's enough to defeat it. And theoretically, kind of with my analysis, where I'm saying, well, they crossed that masculine and feminine, and they approached it, and you could say, I said before in the last episode that Krillin is filling in that role of Oolong for Bulma. This is Bulma starting to integrate a little bit more of that masculine
Starting to
spirit too.
respect the spirit. Yeah, definitely.
And so she thinks that would be enough, and it would make sense that she would think that would be enough to defeat.
But she's not
what's
on
down
that
here.
tier. She's not on this is a challenge for Goku.
Right.
This
And
is
so
like
this
way
transcends her, and
beyond
it
what-
drags the heroic spirit down into the unconscious again,
Yeah.
because that isn't enough. That's not enough for you to really have gained the enlightenment that you need here in the depths. So we'll talk about that enlightenment then, because the tail pulls Goku down into the down underwater, down into the unconscious,
And then electrocutes him.
and starts to electrocute him. And
But only after he's in the unknown does it electrocute him and bring him that painful enlightenment that we all experience when we make bad mistakes and must confront them. This is, I think, something that Goku can learn from as well. But go on.
this is an inversion of Roshi's enlightenment, right?
I was going to say Blue as well.
Sure. But remember, the last lightning attack we saw on Goku was the lightning surprise attack
Lightning surprise. Okay.
that
that's what
Roshi
you're
used
talking
on
about.
Goku, which is that logos logical thing, but this is not that. So this is an enlightenment that Goku can interface with and doesn't have to submit to, whereas that enlightenment he needed to submit to and he couldn't do it. So this is something that Goku now, in his strength and sort of, this is a stronger instantiation of Goku's heroic spirit, actually can break that tail. And so he breaks the tail that's holding him underwater and electrifying him with enlightenment, you could say, and paralyzing him.
Well, that's what interfacing with the unknown is enlightening.
And so this is the real test, right? Is if Goku can, if the heroic spirit is enough to overcome this intuition of, it's almost like hopelessness and death, and that it's kind of like that wisdom that death comes for everybody, and it's always down there in the depths, right? And so the breaking of the tail, I feel, is very symbolic, because then immediately what happens afterwards, he breaks the tail, jumps up out of the water, and he lands up high. But the place that he lands on collapses underneath him after he says that he's very exhausted from the experience. And then rubble lands and smashes his tail. And so we see that interplay where it's not just the robot's tail that he's breaking. He's also attacking his own tail. He has to damage his own connection to the unconscious to break out of this place that it drags him down into. And so he says literally, "My tail got smashed," I think. I
Mhm.
think that that's why those two things happen back to back because, uh, how would I say, the robot is that spirit inside of you, or it's the spirit inside of the individual or inside of the self that the heroic spirit needs to contend with. And so the way that Goku is able to not be sucked down into the unconscious forever is to break that, is to sever that in a sense, to damage it.
Okay, interesting. See, I was thinking more that since the robot is the instantiation of the spirit of the mankind's desire to become dragon-like, to become chaotic, right? That idea is foreign to Goku, so much so that when he gets dragged down to the depths, that's something that he can experience in that enlightenment. When he breaks the tail, that's the acknowledgement that he and I agree with you about the connection between his tail and the tail of the robot, because that's kind of the acknowledgement that with the power he holds, he could also become a pirate type spirit. And
That he has the
so
tail in
he
common. Yeah.
decides to break the tail.
Well, it's almost to say your tail is basically a snake's tail.
Yeah.
And Goku says, "No, it's not." And he attacks the tail, not necessarily the snake's tail. He attacks the tail as such, right?
Mhm. And so then he gets it crushed.
Yeah. I think that's a really good way of putting it. Like I'm always kind of like on the nebulous like edges of it, saying like it's the spirit of if this, and you're like, this is specifically what I think. but but yeah, I think
I
we're
mean,
on.
part of it is, I mean, this is the second viewing Brock's ever had
Yeah.
of the show, so let's give you some credit. But yeah, I mean, like I do have some succinct analysis to contribute, and I hope it does. And I think there is some stuff that you bring up though that I've not thought about. Like I didn't consider, and I had considered Krillin as an analog for Oolong in the sense of the disembodied masculine that Bulma has to have,
Well, he's
but
like a little Roshi in that
but
sense too.
he contributes so little to the canon idea that I didn't think that it was really a merger
Yeah,
of the
I just think that Bulma wouldn't be able to do the cannon attack without him,
and
right?
I think you're actually right. So let's go ahead and continue. Then after Goku's tail is crushed, the robot shoots some bullets and chases off Bulma and Krillin.
And Goku is buried under the rubble of sort of the little platform he landed on after he jumped up out of the water. And so he's out of commission as far as we can tell at this point. There's a little shot of Blue standing over him and being like, hmm. It's just judging him. We see that judgmental gaze from Blue, seeing that Goku didn't win.
Well, it's either disgust or not disgust, right?
That's basically his two modes, right?
Yep. And so Bluma and Krillin run down and they find skeletons in a room. And then they run away more. So this is the skeletons in the room here. I guess is this like the control room?
So first, they just find a room with two dead skeletons. One's hanging on what looks like a meat hook, and one has a bullet hole in its head. And then they run away from that, and then they find the control room. Now, we've talked a little bit about that terrible feminine spirit and how it represents death, right? And they keep having to confront death everywhere they go down here. Um, I think there's a little environmental storytelling going on here because the dead skeletons they're seeing don't seem to be pirates. They seem to be sailors, almost as if the pirates came and took over this port.
Mm-hmm.
And so they're seeing the effects of the pirates here and they have to confront it and they're terrified by it and they keep running away. And so this specter of death is chasing them as they run through and confront what's been left behind.
And what has been left behind is that spirit of piracy. So it's really something they have to both externally and internally confront.
Mhm.
Hmm. And so Bulma realizes the robot is part of the security system, and it's an ancient system that she tries to, I guess, recode,
Yeah, she says it's hundreds of years old.
reprogram.
She's never seen anything like it, but she says that if she's able to program it, then she can stop the robot. And I think that's interesting because this is very symbolic. This whole space is symbolic of the theme, and so Bulma has now had to come face to face with that
Well,
technology
not
at
just
its
Bulma,
root.
but Krillin. It's that merger, right? That are,
Mhm.
and I see what you're saying about, and I think too in the next couple of episodes,
Oh, yeah.
Bulma is such a centerpiece of what happens here
Yeah.
that it is impossible to say what the story would be like without her. And Blue has to be here, Bulma has to be here because that's how
It's
this
a
story is
culmination
going.
of all of it.
Yeah, and so her finding this control room, right? She's finding the root of that spirit, right? What has caused this? And I think that's how I think when they mentioned that it was a ghost, that's how ghosts are dealt with, right?
Well, it's a
Is
Geist.
resolving that unresolved business or that whatever it is that is keeping that spirit
It's
animated.
the spirit of the space that they're in
Mhm.
itself, and now she's found the control room for that. And so, in a sense, if she was developed enough, she could take control. That's to say that that boon that she has could actually, if it was integrated properly, take control of what this space represents. Now, this space, I think, represents chaos itself. And Bulma, being this feminine spirit, should, if she was properly integrated, be able to, if her masculine spirit was integrated properly, she
That's what I was
would
gonna
be
say.
able to interface with
Because
this.
otherwise she'd become a Tiamat if she tried to
Yes.
interface, right?
But
And so she
instead,
can't interface at
she
all.
just can't
That's
do it.
basically it.
Yeah.
Which is for the best, I think, of where she is.
She's not evil. She's just not
Mhm.
integrated. So she just kind of smacks on the keyboard and says, "Oh, I wish I could use this because it would be their salvation and it would stop them from being hunted by the spirit of the place itself, right? It would stop them from being hunted by the inevitable death that's inside of chaos because she would be able to almost become chaos itself. She would be able to identify with it and would be able to internalize what it would represent. But she can't, She's just Bulma is always disintegrated. That's part of who her character is in the story.
Well, her neuroticism is
Hmm.
definitely a symptom of that. So they go up to the control room and they're pursued by the robot.
Right. So she says here, "Oh, the real security guard was the computer all along." The
Yes,
computer, right?
the computer. And so in that building, they Goku eventually is able to wake up.
I like that Blue
Ooh,
respects Goku for being able to wake up
yes.
because he watches Goku stand up and then he goes, "Ah, good on you,"
Well, I
basically.
think that's Blue's ability to discern the admirable from the disadmirable. And I think that goes along with the disgust, right? Things that he's not disgusted by do present real beauty. A rose is beautiful, right?
He recognizes the merit in Goku's
But
mode of
only
being.
that. He's all conscientiousness and no agreeableness.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. Um, and so he respects it in a sense, but will not align with Goku's mode of being, right? So I just wanted to point that out because when there's a little scene there, this cutaway of Goku being able to get back up out of the rubble, right? And that it what even and that's to say that even attacking his own tail, he's still Goku. He's not just a tail, And we know this about him, but Blue doesn't necessarily know that Goku transcends his connection to the more primordial, shadow conscious aspect of him, right? And I think that's what he respects about him. That's the logos in Goku. That's the orderliness in Goku that comes up and transcends the chaos. And so he's not defeated by having to attack the tail. He's not defeated by having to separate himself from that chaotic potentiality, right? There's more to Goku than that. And so Blue sees that, but he doesn't respect the fact that Goku has both elements. He says, "Oh, well, you're kind of like
But
me."
Goku has to go undergo that ego death to
Hmm.
be able to achieve that strength
Yeah,
that
as
he
part of the
gained
archetypal
as part of
story.
both the enlightenment that he got from plunging into the unknown, right? And from that destruction, or let's say uh what do I want to say? Like self not flagellation, but
It's
like
a severance, right? It's
yeah,
like a
well his the attack on his own tail, right?
mhm.
It's that acknowledgement that this is something I should work on and overcome, and I need to kill this poor, weak, corrupt part of myself in order to ascend past the level of spirit that this pirate robot has achieved.
And again, this is another iteration of when Goku does something spiritually significant, he's tired, right? And so whenever he lands up on that ledge, he says he's really tired. So whenever Blue sees that he's not defeated, but he was really just tired out by it, he sees that order manifesting through Goku, and that he restructures sort of in a sense that there's more motivating principle to him than just his power and his potential.
And so Goku goes to the rescue of his friends. He uses the power pole to get up to the control room and helps them get down. This is all after the robot torches the whole control room with flames.
Which of course the robot comes in with a flamethrower, right?
But it's in his
Because
mouth, right?
no, it's on his
Is it on
arm.
his hand?
He
Okay.
his one of his arms has sort of
Oh, okay.
a gun on it that fires out a flamethrower, and it's a really comical
Yeah,
scene
there it is. Yeah.
because yeah, it's his left arm. He fires flames out of it, right? And he whenever Goku finds them, it's a result of that destruction that
And it's
starts
another
happening.
attempt to be a dragon like creature,
hmm
right? Yeah.
it's of course it's the flames. It's that chaotic, destructive manifestation, and so it it doesn't just attack them. It comes in and attacks the computer itself. It attacks control. It attacks the
Order.
ability
Yeah.
to control the chaos because this is just a spirit of death and chaos.
Yes. And so
And of
once
course, if Bulma was able to do what she needed to do, this wouldn't happen. But the fact that she was not able to leads to the inevitable destruction of potentially controlling that chaos.
right, and there is no control of it at this point. So the only thing left to the heroic spirit is to use the truth manifested by his interface with the unknown to defeat the dragon of chaos.
So he does two things. Well, I guess I should say he does three things. The first thing he does is whenever he sees where he needs to go, he uses the power pole, the Noibo, to find them, right? So he elevates himself with the Noibo, sees exactly where they are, and then rescues them with it. Again, down here, the thing that they always need to be able to be saved from these chaotic spirits is
Is
the
the Noibo,
Noibo, is
yes.
that Axis Mundi, is the center. So he centers them, he brings them to where they need to be so that they can get away from the chaos. But he also uses it in a clever way because he does not go back down with them, but he gets on top of the tower that's down here, which is like a little symbol, right? It's like a tower is like a mountain. It's like a hierarchy, right? And
It's
so
like a
here at the
pyramid, yeah.
so here at the top of the tower is the control, right? It's the logos at the top of that pyramid. So Goku gets on top of the tower itself, and then he calls out. He says, "Come on, robot!" And once Bulma and Krillin have already ran off, it comes out after he calls for it. It comes out the bottom, right? So he's on the top, and it's at the bottom. So it comes out the bottom and starts looking around. But he has that elevated vision now that he's on the top of the
That
hierarchy,
insight, let's say.
and
Well,
so he's
not only
gained the
that, but he's
insight.
gained the insight from his interface down below, and now he's transcended it up to the top to then use as leverage against the spirit he's trying to
And
combat.
that's what defeats it, is
Yes.
the fact that he has now elevated his vision from that interface, and that's what Blue recognized in him that was admirable, was his ability to transcend it. And so what defeats the robot is that Goku comes down from the heavens, so to speak, down and crushes its skull, right? He punches through the skull and defeats the skull.
Well, he also uses his Jenkin technique, right? He
Yes.
says rock,
He says rock.
right? So the
This is power.
instantiation of overcoming and interfacing with the unknown is what can ultimately defeat death. And it's said here, it's almost a claim at this point. And then in the next couple episodes, and especially in the next few after that, we're going to see that proven throughout the enactment of what Goku interfaces with.
And one thing we do talk about often in terms of the Janken technique is it has to do with the terms of the game. And what's happened here is that Goku knows the game,
Goku now knows the game. He's been initiated.
and he can forthrightly engage in
So
the game.
separation, right? This is what Joseph Campbell writes about, right?
Right.
Separation, initiation, return. This is a microcosm of it. Separated, dragged down to the depths. Initiated, electrocuted. His tail is attacked. He undergoes eco death.
He goes unconscious.
Return, yeah, he goes unconscious. Return is his ascendancy to the top of the hierarchy and his using of that as leverage against the spirit, which he is now higher than.
Which is now a game because he can replicate his ability to do this. And it's symbolically playing out in the terms of a game because this is not just a fluke incident. This is now something that Goku can do. And it's something that he has contextualized. And he says, if I confront this on the terms that I understand, it will repeatedly defeat
It's
this
also his
spirit.
whole spirit
Yeah.
that he involves.
He
in
does
this.
put all of himself into a single point, right?
Yes.
With that attack.
Right, and I think that all goes into it. So, the next thing we see is everything starts collapsing, everything starts getting destroyed.
Now, I want to point out that as soon as he defeats the robot, two things happen. One, everything just starts collapsing, right?
Mhm.
The whole space starts crumbling in. But two, right after we see it happen, we see Bulma uses the dragon radar and sees down here where exactly the Dragon Ball is. But that hasn't happened until now, right?
Had to happen after this, yeah.
So it follows that once the heroic spirit overcomes this and is put in the right place, then Bulma is able to see where
Well,
down here the Dragon Ball
that's
would
part
be.
of the great boon that Bulma has is that ability to use and manipulate the knowledge gained through that interface between the unknown and the known to benefit her and enlighten and set her vision in the right direction.
This is the way that the interplay goes
The
between
way,
Goku and
yes.
Bulma, right? Because she needs Goku to make the way for her almost. Even if she can see which way she needs to go, she can't get there without Goku. And this plays out in that sense because symbolically she doesn't see where it is until he does this because he needs to
And it's
make the way
partially
for
because
her.
Bulma can't and hasn't made the right sacrifices.
But Goku
Has.
can and is doing so
Right,
for her.
exactly. And so everything starts collapsing. Bulma and Krillin go on ahead and they start looking for the Dragon Ball. They leave a little mark for Goku to follow them. And then they dive down into a hole where they start swimming. Goku runs the wrong way because Blue draws the arrow in the opposite direction. And Blue dives in after Bulma and Krillin to confront them at the site where the Dragon Ball appears to be.
Now, I like that the way that Bulma and Krillin go, which is the correct way to get to the Dragon Ball, they find yet another place to dive down underwater. It's like,
Well, they have to first to get up, yeah.
yeah, it's scaled. They keep having to do it. It's like, Toriyama is saying, like, look, the way that you do this is you dive down underwater.
Is that you
Even if you're underwater, you dive down
you
underwater.
forthrightly place your being in the unknown and confront it with truth and hope for the best, really, because I mean, even in this one, everything's collapsing. They want the Dragon Ball. They go dive into this tunnel with no guarantee that there's even another side, right? And they do reach it, but it's that kind of faith in the fact that if one encounters the unknown forthrightly, then things will be set right. That's what they're embodying, and it's why they're able to get to the ultimate place that they do.
Embodying being the operative word there, because I said earlier in this episode, it comes down to it being an embodied thing. You can't just rely on the spirit that's laid out by the myth of the hero. You have to do it yourself. And
And
that's
so
why
Krillin and Bulma do it, yeah.
the presence of Blue is what separates Goku from them and it becomes the next test for Bulma. And now it's really boiled down to what I was saying. It's Bulma and Krillin, with Krillin being sort of this extracted masculine aspect. And so, what do you have to do? Okay, without Goku present, do it again. Dive down into chaos, confront the unknown forthrightly, and seek the enlightenment in the depths. Without Goku there to do it for you, you need to be the one doing it.
Mm-hmm.
And so Goku, of course, is misled by Blue's trickery because Sends him on a dead end, essentially.
Blue also says before he dives in after them, I wonder if it's clean water.
He says, "How disgusting!" Ew.
Yeah, of course he does. He is that. And that power of disgust is way, way more powerful than people imagine. It's what led to the Nazis.
Right?
Yeah,
It's that. It's the misled intonation towards perfection. Right?
exactly. And so next episode, we're going to see that confrontation. I think I'm very excited for it.
Oh yeah.
It'll be interesting to hear what you have to say, Brock.
I'm excited to talk about it.
Anything else we got to say for this episode? I think it was a pretty. It's not even a bottle episode, but it's so concise in what it has to
Yeah.
say.
Everything that happens in this episode has a reason that it happens, and it's going to be the same way with the next episode as well, because the next episode is going to tie up even more loose ends from this episode.
Yes. And so this is our farewell to Pirate Robot. Even though you seemed like, to me as a kid, a random encounter, you've done well, kid.
Yeah, Pirate Robot operates like a key.
F in
Right?
the chat for Pirate Robot, everyone.
Everyone's favorite character now.
Hey, he's pretty good.
He's pretty great.
He's
I
pretty
actually
good
really
character.
love his design.
Yes.
I think we'll be returning to his design in the next episode. It's so specific and concise and accurate to what it's supposed to
especially
represent.
what we're going to talk about, some
Yeah.
of the symbology in the next episode. So, if you liked what you heard, please subscribe, give us a like, ring that bell for notifications, give us a subscribe on Rumble, give us a shit boot on BitChute.
If you didn't like the video, say that you didn't like it. The dislike button doesn't work anymore on YouTube.
Just comment this. I did not like this.
Or just comment dislike.
You could do that too. And remember, Toei should not be claiming these copyrights at all. Really should be fair use. We want to make that clear.
We want the conversation.
The best way to get the best ideas is to have all ideas engage.
Free speech.
Exactly. All right. Well, I'm your host on the left, Al.
I'm your host on the right, Brock.
And I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. It was called Beware of Robot. Have a good night, everyone.
How could he be a Super Saiyan when I, the Prince of all Saiyans, could not? I decided to continue my training in the solitude of space. When a violent electrical storm erupted in the skies of the planet I was on, I welcomed it. Like it was an outward manifestation of the storm that was raging inside of me.